left.
Yeah, the extreme left. They're just as nasty, but there's more of them.
Yes.
And they're just as nasty.
The ideology behind that drives that.
Yeah, totally. For me personally, this is why we need a muscular Christian faith. Because a muscular Christian faith ain't going to judge you by the colour of your skin, you know. And if your faith, even as a Muslim, if your faith isn't something that's unjust in the way that it's being practiced or what it stands for, it can be totally tolerated, you know. We'd much more engage you in dialogue and discussion and conversation.
So would you call yourself a devout Christian?
Depends what you mean by devout.
Not quite devout as someone who goes to the church every Sunday, someone who abides by all, obviously, your Christian rules.
Well,
but if you follow the book, the Bible.
Do you mean do I take it seriously?
Yeah.
If we're defining devout as do I take it seriously, then yes, I could call myself devout.
But do you practice your religion?
Well, you tell me what you think.
I'll probably say yeah. I'll say you seem like a devout Christian to me.
Yeah, I think the truth is that in the Christian faith, like our concept of sin, of what sin is, it's an archery term. You know, you've got this target, you've got the bullseye, you're meant to shoot loose the arrow and the arrow goes towards the bullseye. If you don't hit the bullseye, you don't hit perfection, it's called sin. Yeah? So as Christians, within our worldview, we understand our lives as constantly striving towards a perfection, to be perfect as our Father in heaven is perfect, which is what Christ commanded us, but also the full knowledge that we're not achieving that perfection yet in this life. And so what we must do is we must continue to strive. We must continue to exert ourselves towards that perfection. You know, through the practice of disciplines like fasting and a regular rhythm of prayer and giving of alms to charity and, you know, maintaining the fellowship and, you know, reading scripture, receiving of the sacraments, and living in community, practicing evangelism, studying the faith. You know, these disciplines help to peg in our life on its course, on its journey towards that Christian goal. But because we always fall short of the glory of God, there then begs the question about what do we do about that problem? You know, because there's always this disparity between where we're meant to be to enter into the presence of God and where we are, which is below that necessary glory. And that's why we believe Christ came to pay the dividend, to account for the loss. You know, because otherwise, if God simply forgives us of our mercy, you know, out of His mercy, He just forgives us, but sin goes unpunished, then God is not just. You know, and God has to be just. Sin has to be punished.
So talking about God, one thing I want to find out is how Christians claim that Jesus is the Son of God, and then you follow Jesus more than you follow God.
Yeah. Okay. That's a fair question. Allow me to deal with it. Could you contact JC? In terms of this idea of following God, right? This terminology, even in the way that you say the question, the way I hear it is about the Father and the Son. As I'm sure you know, we Christians believe in one God, and that God is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. So if we're following Jesus, who is the perfect image of the Father, so much so that Christ Himself says, "He who has seen me has seen the Father," then that means when we're following Christ, we are following the very image of God in human form, the very image of the Father in human form. And so by following one, we're following God. So by following Christ, we are following God. Christ Himself said that, you know, if you loved the Father, you would love me. If you loved the Father, you would obey me, because I came from the Father. So for us as Christians, there isn't this dichotomy between following God the Father and following Jesus Christ the Son, because to follow one is to follow the will of the other.
And so what do you think about when the Muslims, they claim that Prophet Isa alayhi salam, Jesus is our prophet? I believe that the Isa that Muslims claim to believe in has no historical connection to the real person of Yeshua, Jesus Christ. The Quran, the Jesus of the Quran is a figment of Muhammad's invention. Because when you look at the historicity of the claims that are made in the Quran and the claims that are made in the Bible,
only the claims that are made in the Bible have any kind of connection to history. And I'll give you some examples to that. So, you look at the claims made in the Quran, you would believe in a prophet who was born of a virgin, who was never crucified, who was raised up to heaven, who taught Islamic Tawhid.
Yeah.
Okay? In history, outside of this claim in the Quran, we find no evidence for this person or this movement at all. We have no evidence of an Injil, an Islamic Injil.
Yeah.
By contrast, Christians believe that Christ was born of a virgin, that he was God incarnate, that he was crucified, and that he rose again from the dead.
Yeah.
Now, when we look at history,
Yeah.
when we look at the historicity, we look at Josephus, we look at Sartorius, we look at a number of other ancient historians who are not Christians. They talk about these events. They talk about this person. And they talk about this group called Christians.
Yeah.
So, this claim made by Muhammad is a fiction,
Right.
and it contradicts all the available historical evidence.
Right. Fair enough.
Now let me ask you a question. If you were to weigh up two positions, okay, and the evidence clearly supported one position over another, as a man of rationality, as a man of understanding, as a man of courage and conviction, which of those two positions should you follow?
So I personally follow the position of my religion, which in believing that 𝐸𝐸, Jesus, is our prophet.
Yeah, but if the position itself is contradicted by all the evidence, are you not obliged to discredit the position and take on a new position?
I could be,
or is it just blind faith for Muslims?
It's not blind faith. It's just, where's this information? Where's it come from? How is this? How is your information credible?
This is a good question. So let us deal with that question. Let's deal with it in terms of the claim that Christ was crucified. Yeah. Now you know the claim of the Quran. Yeah. They crucified him not, only it was made an appearance to them. That's the claim of the Quran.
Right.
Okay. You know what the claim of the Christians is? Christ was crucified.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Now, in terms of looking for evidence outside of your religious books and outside of my religious books, yeah, we can look at the historians that were around at the time, Jewish historians, Roman historians. These people, they were against the Christian faith, so they have every reason to discredit the Christian faith, okay? And to discredit Christian claims. But the claims that they make, Josephus wrote, and he wrote in between 37 AD and 120 AD. Bearing in mind, Christ was crucified 30 AD, there and thereabouts. In his book Antiquities, book 18, chapter 3, part 3, he writes, and also in book 20, chapter 9, part 1, he describes Christ as the following: one who performed miracles, one who was a teacher, a Jew who had Gentile followers, who was called Christ, Christos, who was crucified under Pontius Pilate by the leading Jews of his age, who also stoned James because they accused James of being a breaker of the law. Now in the scriptures it says James was stoned. It says Christ was crucified. And Josephus, a Jewish historian who has every reason to attack the Christian faith, is confirming what we believe and disconfirming what the Quran claims.
So do you believe Jesus was a Jew?
Yeah, of course he was.
And how can you call yourself a Christian if you believe he was a Jew? Then
okay.
Why would you not call yourself Jewish?
So that's a good question. It deserves an honest answer. What is it to be a Christian?
Yeah.
The term Christian was first coined in Antioch by Roman pagans as an insult to the followers of Christ, who at that time simply called themselves followers of the way. That's an ancient name for ourselves. Yeah? Those that know church history know that. That the followers of the way were accused by Roman pagans as being Christians, which is an insult. It means little Christ. Little Christ. We Christians then took this insult and turned it into a compliment by taking the name for ourselves with pride and courage. And so we became known as Christians, and we called ourselves Christians.
What did Jesus Christ do?
If you just bear with us 1 second, brother. So it's within that context. It's within that context that Christians call themselves Christians, because we're trying to follow Christ. Christ says only make disciples of all the nations. So I can just as easily call myself a disciple of Christ. I even have to use the word Christian. But I have no problem with the word Christian.
So who would you say Bethlehem belongs to, the Jews or the Christians?
Say again?
Who in your mind, who does Bethlehem belong to, the Jews or the Christians?
That's a political question, and I would say that in terms of Bethlehem, I would stake the claim for the Christians to have Bethlehem, Jerusalem, Antioch, Damascus. Like, all of those lands were originally Christian. All of North Africa was originally Christian. Those are our lands. They've been stolen from us through violent conquest and persecution. And, you know, it's like Constantinople. This is a Christian city. You know, Great Asia Minor, Christian city, Greater Armenia, all originally Christian. These are all lands that have been stolen from the Christians. And I feel we have a legitimate stake to all of them.
So who stole them though?
Muslims. Muslims did. You stole them.
Fair enough.
Now let me ask you this question. If Christians stole Muslim lands, would you want it back?
Of course.
Right. So have we got any problem with us demanding North Africa, Asia Minor, the Levant back to us?
No.
Yeah. Let me ask you this question. If the evidence contradicts your belief, isn't it incumbent upon you as a searcher for truth? Because for me personally, bro, I want to be where the truth is.
Yeah.
I don't want to make my own truth.
Yeah.
I want to stand in what the truth is.
Yeah.
And if all the evidence points towards the truth, a truth, then that's where I want to be. Now, your beliefs contradict all the evidence. It's incumbent upon you, if you're genuinely seeking to stand in the truth, to change your beliefs to where the evidence leads you. And the evidence leads you outside of Islam. Seriously. Yeah? I'll give you another example. So I gave you Josephus. Sertorius was writing between 69 and 140 AD in his book, The Life of the Caesars. And he was writing about Claudius and Nero. Okay? These were Caesars around the time of Christ and just after Christ. And in his book, he mentions that Christ was a cause of trouble and the center of a new superstition. Now notice the derogatory language that he's referring to Christians by, this new superstition. He's not a believer, but he's saying that Christ is the founder of a new superstition. Now when he's writing 69 to 140 AD, if you look back into the annals of history and look for evidence of which community he's referring to, we find zero evidence, zip, nada, nothing of an early Islamic community. There's nothing. But we do find the writings of the Church Fathers. We find the writings of the Church Fathers who are my historical heritage, my historical forefathers, who teach the doctrines I teach. So when he talks about this new superstition, who's he talking about? The evidence points towards he's talking about us, not you. So that means that this Christ, who is the center of a new superstition, is not a Muslim prophet, but a Christian Messiah.
One last question, brother. Who do you think Israel belongs to?
Israel? Yeah. Are we talking about land or are we talking about the people?
Land.
That belongs to God.
God.
Everything belongs to God ultimately.
It belongs to God, but as in, like, does it belong to the Jews, or in your mind, or does it, in your opinion, does it belong to the Jews or does it belong to the Muslims?
It belongs to the Christians.
To the Christians?
Yeah.